They told him to choose his child or his uniform. When he chose both, they threw him out like he was nothing. 10 years later, the same people who slammed the door on a struggling single father were standing in silence, because the man they rejected had returned in a way no one, absolutely no one, expected. Stay with this story till the very end, because the ending will change how you see sacrifice, kindness, and destiny forever. And before we begin, if you believe powerful real-life stories deserve to be told, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps true kindness tales reach more hearts. 10 years ago, David Miller stood in a narrow office hallway, holding his 3-year-old son Noah on his hip, the weight of exhaustion heavier than the bag slung over his shoulder. He was a widower, a single father who hadn't slept properly in months, surviving on faith, cheap coffee, and the promise he had made at his wife's grave, that their son would grow up proud of his father. Joining the Navy wasn't a dream of glory for David. It was survival. It meant healthcare for Noah, stability, food on the table, and a future that didn't involve choosing between rent and medicine. But dreams don't always survive the judgment of others. When David informed his family and close-knit community of his decision, the reaction was brutal. His in-laws accused him of abandoning his child. Neighbors whispered that he was selfish. Even his own father, a man David had always respected, told him coldly that a real parent doesn't run away. The words cut deeper than any physical blow. The final strike came when the local guardianship council, pressured by family, ruled that David was unfit to raise a child while serving. Within days, Noah was taken to live with relatives, and David was told not to come back until he chose responsibility over ego. The night before he left for training, David stood outside the house where his son slept, unable to go in, pressing his palm against the cold door as tears streamed down his face. He whispered promises into the dark, promises that no one heard but God. Boot camp was unforgiving, but nothing hurt more than the silence that followed him. Letters he sent were returned unopened. Photos of Noah never came. David trained harder than anyone, not out of ambition, but out of pain. Every push-up carried a memory, every mile run carried guilt. He learned discipline, leadership, and restraint, not just as a sailor, but as a man broken and rebuilding himself piece by piece. While others trained for medals, David trained for redemption. Years passed. Promotions came slowly, earned through integrity rather than favor. He volunteered for the toughest assignments, not because he was fearless, but because fear no longer scared him. Deep inside, he carried the image of a small boy with his eyes and his mother's smile. He didn't know if Noah remembered him. He didn't know if he would ever be forgiven. But he never stopped believing that one day, somehow, his son would know the truth, that his father never left him. He fought to come back worthy of him. By the 7th year, Commander David Miller had become a name spoken with respect in places where excuses didn't survive. He was known for fairness, quiet strength, and an unusual habit, staying behind after missions to make sure everyone got home safe. Few knew his story, and those who did learned quickly not to pity him. David never spoke ill of the people who cast him out. He carried no public anger, only a private resolve that shaped every decision he made. Meanwhile, Noah grew up believing his father had chosen the sea over him. That was the story told at dinner tables and school meetings. His uncle provided a roof, but not warmth. Noah learned early not to ask questions. He became quiet, observant, and distant, especially on days when other kids talked about the dads. On his 10th birthday, Noah found an old photograph hidden in a drawer, a man in a simple shirt holding a toddler, smiling like the world finally made sense. On the back were the words, "For Noah. Always." Something cracked open inside him. The same year, the town prepared for a major naval ceremony honoring service members and fallen heroes. It was the largest event the community had seen in decades. Schools were invited. Families lined the streets. Noah attended with his class, standing among strangers, unaware that his life was about to change. When the ceremony began, The crowd watched as decorated officers marched forward. Then the announcer's voice rang out, naming the commanding officer who would deliver the address, a man recognized for extraordinary service, humanitarian missions, and leadership under fire. Commander David Miller stepped forward. The moment Noah saw him, something strange happened. He didn't know why, but his chest tightened. The man's posture, his eyes, the way he scanned the crowd, not with pride, but with humility, felt familiar. As David spoke, he didn't talk about victories or enemies. He spoke about sacrifice, about parents who leave not because they don't love, but because love demands courage. He spoke about children who grow up without answers, and fathers who carry regret like a second skin. Then he paused, his voice breaking for the first time, and said, 10 years ago, I lost my son, not because I stopped loving him, but because I refused to stop fighting for his future. The air went still. Noah felt tears before he understood why. David removed a folded letter from his uniform and read the final line. If you're here today, Noah, just know, I never left. I was coming back. Silence turned into sobs. The truth rippled through the crowd like a wave, reaching ears that once spoke judgment. In that moment, the town realized something terrible and beautiful at the same time. They hadn't just rejected a man, they had broken a family. Noah didn't wait for permission. He ran, through rows of stunned adults, past teachers who tried to stop him, straight toward the man whose words had reached his heart before his mind could catch up. David saw him coming and dropped to his knees before Noah collided into his chest. For the first time in 10 years, father and son held each other, not as strangers, not as mistakes, but as survivors. The crowd stood frozen, many with tears they didn't try to hide. The same people who once judged David now witnessed the cost of their certainty. David didn't demand apologies. He didn't raise his voice. He simply held his son and whispered, I'm here. In the days that followed, the story spread far beyond the town. Interviews were requested. Headlines were written. But David declined most of them. He wasn't there to shame anyone. His return wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about choosing kindness where bitterness would have been easier. He worked through the legal process quietly, respectfully, until Noah came home with him. Not to a mansion, not to glory, but to a life built on patience, honesty, and healing. The town tried to make amends. Public apologies, offers of support, gestures too late but still sincere. David accepted them all with grace, teaching Noah something powerful. Forgiveness is not forgetting pain, but refusing to let it poison the future. Years later, when Noah stood taller and stronger, he would tell people his father was his hero, not because he wore a uniform, but because he never let anger win. Because when the world kicked him out, he returned with compassion instead of revenge. And that changed everything. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that true strength lies in kindness and patience, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. True Kindness Tales exists to share stories that restore faith in humanity, and your support helps us tell many more.